All right, today we're going to dig into something pretty fascinating, the story of your school curriculum.
Have you ever really thought about it? Why did you have to learn algebra? Why Shakespeare? It turns out the subjects you spent all those years studying, well, they weren't picked out of a hat.
Nope. What you learned in school is actually the end result of a 400-year-long story. It's a story packed with religion, revolution, and some seriously competing ideas about what school is even for. So, let's trace it all the way back to the beginning.
Okay, so our story kicks off in colonial America. And back then, the whole point of school was, well, it was super focused. We're not talking about self-discovery or finding your passion here. It was all about salvation and maintaining social order.
You see, the first laws about education weren't really about building schools as we know them. The main goal was just to make sure kids could read, specifically for religious reasons. In fact, get this. A famous law from 1647 was literally called the Old Deluder Satan Act. The whole idea was that if you could read the Bible for yourself, you had a direct line of defense against the devil. No joke.
And if you want proof, just look at the main textbook they used for over 100 years, the New England Primer. The very first lesson for the letter A was, "In Adam's fall, we sinned all." Wow, that's not just an alphabet rhyme, right? That's a heavy-duty theological lesson. Every single piece of the curriculum was soaked in Puritan religious beliefs.
So, what were the learning tools like back then? Well, they were pretty simple and straight to the point. You're looking at the Hornbook. You can kind of think of it as the original tablet. Seriously, it was durable, it was portable, and it came preloaded with all the essential apps, the alphabet so you could learn to read, and the Lord's Prayer for your moral compass. But then, of course, a revolution happens, and that changes everything. With the United States now a brand new country, the school curriculum suddenly had to serve a new master. It wasn't just about God anymore. Now it was about the Republic.
And this was a massive, massive shift. The big question behind education totally flipped. It went from, how do we save souls, to, okay, how do we build a new nation? Suddenly, learning wasn't just for religious salvation. It was seen as the absolute bedrock of democracy.
And this new mission had some really powerful champions. He had guys like Benjamin Rush, who basically said spending years on Latin and Greek was like catching butterflies, when we should be studying useful stuff, like science. Then there was Thomas Jefferson, who famously argued, a nation can't be both ignorant and free. He had Noah Webster, who was on a mission to create a unique American language, and William McGuffey, who wanted his textbooks to define what it meant to be a good American. And the influence these guys had, it was absolutely massive. Just look at this number, 120 million. That's how many copies of McGuffey's Readers were sold. That's just staggering. And these books weren't just teaching kids how to read. They were teaching millions of them a very specific vision of American character, patriotism, and morality. Okay, so while all this is happening in America, there's this wave of brand new ideas about education coming over from Europe. And these ideas were revolutionary because they were about to shift the entire focus away from just the subject matter and onto the child. And you can kind of see these ideas building on each other. First, you have Pestalozzi, who said education should be about drawing out a kid's potential, not just stuffing facts in. Then Froebel comes along and invents the kindergarten, literally a children's garden, where kids are like little plants that need to be nurtured with play and songs. Harbart added the idea that schools need a system to build moral character. And finally, Spencer really pushed for a curriculum that was all about science and practical, useful knowledge. And this whole new way of thinking was perfectly summed up by a single, game-changing question from Herbert Spencer. What knowledge is of most worth? Think about that. That one question challenged centuries of tradition. Spencer was basically saying, hey, why are we still teaching the classics just because we always have? Shouldn't we be teaching what's actually useful for surviving and thriving in this new industrial world?
So, what you've got now is this whirlwind of competing ideas. And it's all happening just as the United States is facing this enormous new challenge, trying to educate everybody. You've got waves of immigrants arriving, cities are booming. How do you build a school system for all of them?
Well, the result was a curriculum that just kept getting bigger and bigger. It started out with the basics, right? Reading, spelling, arithmetic. But then pretty soon you've got geography and history added to the list. Then science, art, and PE. By 1900, you're even seeing things like music and homemaking. And you can bet that every single one of those additions came after a huge debate about what knowledge was really the most important.
But the growth of elementary school was nothing compared to the high school boom. I mean, in 1900, going to high school was super rare, pretty much just for the wealthy elite. But then this landmarked court case in Kalamazoo, Michigan, makes it legal to use public tax money for high schools, and boom, enrollment just explodes. Think about it. In just 70 years, high school goes from being a privilege for a tiny few to something almost every American kid experiences.
And all this massive, rapid growth sets the stage perfectly for the 20th century. This is where the curriculum becomes a full-blown intellectual battlefield, where all those tensions we've been talking about finally collide.
And really, the conflict boils down to two main camps. On one side, you have the traditionalists. They wanted to stick with the classical curriculum, Latin, Greek, core subjects, arguing that it builds mental discipline and teaches timeless values. And on the other side, you've got the progressives. They were inspired by people like Spencer, and they wanted a curriculum that was modern, scientific, and actually relevant to a kid's real life and future job. And what's so wild is just how modern the progressive vision sounds, even to us today. I mean, look at this. A report from way back in 1927 was calling for a curriculum that focuses on real-world issues, that teaches students how to think critically, and that fosters open-mindedness. Sound familiar? These are the exact same things we're still debating in education right now. So this incredible 400-year journey, from a simple horn book all the way to a call for critical thinking, it brings us right up to the present day. So what's next? Where does all this history leave us?
Well, here's the most important takeaway. The curriculum has never been some fixed, settled thing. It's always been an argument, an ongoing debate about our values, our goals, and what kind of future we want to build. What we teach in school isn't just about facts and figures. It's a reflection of who we want our kids to be, and really who we want to be as a society. And that leaves us with the biggest question of all, then and now. Who gets to decide? If you want to dive deeper into any of this, we've put a full list of our sources down in the description. Thanks so much for joining us.